Hughes first came to the attention of the Secret Service on October 4th, 2013. At that time, the Secret Service obtained information that Hughes intended to fly a single-seat aircraft onto the grounds of the Capitol or the White House with no specific time frame provided.
Well, now we know the time frame. A couple of weeks ago, Douglas Hughes flew his gyrocopter right past all those restrictions and onto the Capitol's west lawn. That's why the Secret Service, who interviewed Hughes and other agencies, were coming under congressional fire on Capitol Hill. Earlier today, senior political reporter Scott Thuman is standing by for us live in the newsroom this afternoon. Scott, seems as if Secret Service Director Joe Clancy is in a hearing like this almost every week now.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, he is. Of course, he was certainly not the only one up there today. You saw everyone from NORAD to Capitol Police and the FAA, because there are so many different elements to the lines of defense here, and the questions from members of Congress today in that oversight committee is how in the world could you go past all of those lines and not be detected? One of the biggest things we realized, Dave, through this testimony is that you can talk about planes on radar if we want to simplify this, and you can talk about other items. This would be an other item, another object, right? It's a smaller one, and so sometimes those just show up as dots on the radar. This one would only show up intermittently, and it can easily be confused with everything from a flock of birds to a kite. That's one level of difficulty. The other is we don't know, it seems a little murky, the waters are, exactly when members of security and national security were alerted to this, if they really realized what they were facing. And it seems through testimony that we just witnessed the past half hour, they weren't really prepared to do anything such as shoot that down if necessary.
You've got a dude in a gyrocopter 100 feet in the air crossing 30-plus miles of restricted airspace. Whose job is it to detect him, and whose job is it to take him down?
Sir, as the commander of NORAD, that's my responsibility, and I'm accountable for that.
Why didn't it happen?
Because we're working against physics, sir.
Dave, he's talking about technology and the lack of it when it comes to being able to differentiate something like a gyrocopter, which of course could have been carrying plastic explosives, a lot of members of the committee were suggesting today, and something as innocuous as birds or a kite. So they do have challenges, but they also had some communication errors which were very significant.
It's one thing, I suppose, if it is a titanium high-tech aircraft, that we can probably see. It's the plastic and the tubular metal and lawn chair analogy that's often made about that gyrocopter that puts it at the low end of the spectrum, and I guess the low end of the threat spectrum as well.
Yeah, and that is a challenge that they're going to have to try and tackle over the coming years here, because this is not going to go away, as we've discussed multiple times. You had the drone that landed on the White House property earlier this year. That showed a little bit of an alarm that perhaps they hadn't been thinking enough about. But how do you prevent this sort of thing? And that's what they're tasked with finding out now. But, Dave, it's very interesting because these committee members all, as they typically do, they all kind of take big bites at you in these hearings. But they were backed up by a lot of data here saying we have to have a better line of defense. How do we not? And there weren't good answers. And the last thing I'll point out here, Dave, is that also when it comes to the communications issues there, once again, an alert didn't go out to all of the members of Congress. Went to the Senate, somehow didn't get to the House. They said, how does that not happen? They asked the Sergeant at Arms. He said, well, that was a mistake, something that we're fixing. It won't happen again. Unfortunately for them, it seems like these are the problems that reoccur, and they end up back in these hearings again where there's a lot of grandstanding. Sometimes there are answers, sometimes there's not. But often enough, not enough results that we prevent a recurrence.
A lot of people in similar positions said the same thing after 9/11, that it wouldn't happen again, and this time it did, but with considerably less of a horrible outcome. Scott Thuman for us live in our newsroom this afternoon, giving us the big picture look at those hearings. Scott, many thanks.